one of the things that we see a lot is as we get into practices and we start diagnosing all of this is the big symptom that causes some doctors to have this cycle of hiring and firing in their practice. Just a lot of turnover because they're evaluating their team members and they're assessing that they're not getting the job done and making a decision, bringing a new person in, and they are the constant variable that is contributing to the lack of success for people. And you can say, well, it's no, because I'm not recruiting and hiring very well. And we just went through 3.5 hours, I think it was, Colin, on how to effectively recruit. It was a big one. It's important. But it's actually, that's not always the real issue. And oftentimes it's not the real issue, as you can see from these numbers. If we want our people to be really good, how can they be really good if they're not clear on their priorities? 1 month, we're telling them to focus on this number. The next month, we're telling them, don't worry about it. We create a lot of confusion and we don't even realize it. How are they supposed to be A players if they're not getting consistent feedback and communication? 2 degrees of separation over time creates a wide gap. If they're not getting presented with opportunities to learn and grow, they're butting up against the same problem and wall over and over again, and frustration sets in for them. And then obviously in terms of being able to, being held accountable, or should they be held accountable with achievable goals? All of these things, how can our people be A players or expected to be A players, and really have a true evaluation if 70% plus are suffering from all 4 of these things? So we want to look at ourselves. We want to make sure that we look at it and say, hey, if all problems are leadership problems, then I can go solve the things that I'm bringing into this, which, by the way, there are no perfect leaders. So there's always going to be the next level of opportunity for us as leaders to be able to improve. But if all problems are leadership problems, then I'm going to take my responsibility. I'm going to try to solve it. And then I can isolate the variable then, which is my team member. And then we can get down to business and helping them grow and evaluating. But it's extremely difficult for us to evaluate our team members and then go to them and say, hey, you're not doing X, Y, and Z. And they say, but I'm not. And it is so detrimental, not only to that relationship, but to when they go to other people on the team and say, I don't feel like this is fair. And they're not right and they're not wrong for that. That's the way that they feel, and there's a reason for it. And that's what we're trying to explain to you and uncover for you guys here. All right. So APlayer Matrix, APlayer, we talk about it all the time. How do we actually effectively define if somebody is an A player, a B player, a C player, a D player? The answer I get most often when I ask this question is, well, an A player is doing really, really good. A B player is doing good. A C player is doing not so good, and a D player is doing bad. Well, that doesn't really help our team members. It's a very loose, subjective way to define where people are at and what is it going to take. Once I understand what my grade is or what quadrant I'm in, what's most important to me is if I find out I'm a B player, my first question is, well, what do I have to do to be an A player? Well, being kind of good and now you need to be really good, that doesn't really help me out very much. So the APlayer Matrix gives us very specific criteria on this and how you can evaluate it. Now, the key is with all of this criteria, guys, and it was actually referenced in some of the quotes, we can't expect our people to be mind readers. We need to get really clear on what success looks like, and we need to give them that criteria. Now, if you guys are giving them that criteria, one of the things I want you guys to think through, this is very important, I want you guys to seek alignment with your team and not agreement. If you set the criteria and they don't agree with it, it is not a conversation. You as the practice leader, it is your job to set the direction. It is your job to set the vision for what you're building. And if they don't agree with it, that's fine. Now, they're not bad people for that, but it is not your job to get them to quote unquote buy in to what you're building. It's your job to set it, and then it's their job to decide whether or not they want to be in alignment with it. That's all it is. And if they don't want to align with it, they are not bad people. We can still unconditionally care for them and love them, but also understand that there's going to be a continual level of friction here until we are aligned on how we look at things. Which, by the way, when we avoid that friction or sweep it under the rug, we both feel it. Nobody's happy in the situation, and it doesn't do anybody any good. So we need to give our people a more tangible understanding of what this means and where this is all coming from and how do they play within a development criteria, and how do they actually improve? How can they be better at evaluating their own performance? And that's where the APlayer Matrix comes into play. Now, this is comprised of two axes, as you can tell. You've got the metrics axis running horizontally, either hitting on the right or not hitting on the left. And then you have the value alignment and passion for the purpose axis running vertically. High value alignment and passion, low value alignment. Okay, so again, simple tools that are powerful enough to go help you guys get the results. 2x2 matrices are so effective in being able to do this. It's proven. We leverage a lot of these throughout everything that we do. And when we go into practices, it's so easy for our people to just to quickly look at this and get it. So let's go ahead and quickly go through this. So on our B players are not hitting metrics. Okay. And if they're not hitting it or they are hitting it, that should be very clear. You set the standard, it's a number, it's quantifiable, and it's either getting hit or it's not. Okay. Now on the value and purpose alignment, they are hitting it. They are aligned. Okay. Now you might be asking, well, wait a second. If somebody's not hitting metrics, they're a B player. I'll give you a shortcut. The C players are hitting metrics, but they're not aligned to the values. Why would we ever do that? Because when people are out of alignment with our approach or our value system and they're not passionate about what they do, they actually drag down the performance of the rest of the team. So you get a compounding decline in performance from those people where they might be hitting their metrics, but the overall performance of the rest of the team is actually impacted. And that compound effect is actually very significant, as opposed to a B player where they're not hitting their metrics, but if they are highly aligned, they're actually contributing to a great environment that people want to be a part of and are excited to go into work every single day. And they actually help to raise up the performance of everyone.
How many times have you heard, David, oh man, I got this one person, they're crushing it, but they got a shitty attitude and I can't fire them. Yep. I can't fire them because they perform so well, but it's drama with a capital D.
Yep.
That's your C player right there.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the word that we talk about on that is being held hostage in those instances, right? You feel like you're being held hostage when you're in a situation where you have somebody that's performing well and you see that they're causing turmoil, but you don't have the confidence that you can get rid of them. Again, this is why it's so important to have an effective recruiting strategy so that you have the confidence to say, you know what? No, I'm going to make the decision that's best for the rest of the team and best for the practice. And I have confidence that I can go out and effectively recruit and source really good people and replace this person. All right, now we get down to the D quadrant. They're not hitting goals. They're not aligned on the approach or values. They're just all together not making it happen. A lot of apathy in this area, just not a lot. It's gray for a reason, right? There's not a lot of growth happening here, not a lot of motivation, not a lot of alignment, not a lot of contribution, period. Yep. And then the last quadrant is our A quadrant, hitting metrics or goals. And they're aligned to the approach and the values. Okay. Now, the key on these things is when we go through and evaluate our team members across this, depending on what quadrant they fall into, if somebody's a B player, I'm going to give them one thing to focus on from a skill set perspective. And I'm going to prioritize the most important thing that they need to focus on from a skill set perspective to improve their performance in that area to help drive up their ability to hit metrics. One thing. Every 30 days, if you give everyone on your team, if you're that mentor that gives everyone on your team one thing, and they can go work on that. And then you have this ability to be able to contextualize how they're performing up against it and review. So they know the accountability is going to be there, right? 19% feel like they're being held accountable. If we have this monthly cycle of continuous review on these things, then that's where you can continue to review and they know that conversation is coming and they're going to ensure that they invest. On the C player side, you're going to choose one thing the most important thing around value or passion for the purpose that they need to work on. Just the one thing. Now on D players, you might give them one of each, and you're going to try to fight like heck for them. But there's probably a good chance that's not going to be a relationship that's going to ultimately work out, and everybody kind of knows that, and it's inevitable. Okay. So in terms of us evaluating our team members, after we evaluate ourselves as leaders, here's how we want to go through that. Here's how we want to evaluate our team. We take this matrix, we go through each person. Now, I want to give you guys a little trick here on the value alignment. The most common question that we get with value alignment is, how do we effectively do that? Metrics or numbers? It's really clear. Okay. To evaluate values, you can just do this yourself. The advanced technique is you can actually ask your team member to do it, but you can do it yourself. On each value, you grade them up against 4 choices, and you have to choose one. There's no in-betweens. You got to force it. 4 choices are outstanding. They're a shining example for the team when it comes to that value. Second, satisfactory. They're aligned to the value. They're doing good. Third is they need improvement. Mostly aligned, but need some work. And 4 is critically misaligned, highly out of alignment. As you're going through and assessing your team members, go through and choose 1, 2, 3, or 4 on each one of those. And if they're not at least satisfactory on every single one of them, then they're out of alignment on your approach and out of alignment on your values. Ensure that your values or your approach are table stakes. It's not okay if you have 4 core values or 4 criteria for your approach as a practice. It's not okay if they're only aligned to 3. We don't sweep it under the rug, because then that tells everybody else it's okay to do 3. And then suddenly it's okay to only be aligned to 2, and so on and so forth. The degradation happens. So you can use that kind of scoring system and that kind of criteria to evaluate them, plot each one of your team members according to the value alignment, vertically, and then their metrics, and you'll find out what quadrant they're in. And then from there, it's easy to create a growth plan by choosing one element based on where they fall.